Sandbox Mode is such a refreshing and relaxing way to play Planet Zoo. The only thing that can possibly hold you back is your own creativity, and the complexity meter, but that's only a problem on console. With unlimited resources at your disposal, it's really easy and really fun to make a zoo for all to enjoy. I'm not just talking about all of the guests who happen to go to your Sandbox Zoo. It's really easy to take care of your animals as well. You can build them an exhibit so big and so vast. Sometimes, to be honest, I get less creative in Sandbox Mode despite having so many tools at my disposal. This is why today, we're actually going to be starting a brand new series, a Franchise Mode Zoo. Franchise Mode and Sandbox Mode are fairly similar. You have all of the exact same content at your disposal, however in Franchise Mode you actually have to earn it by doing research, and it costs money. There's a few other different rules, but those are the basic differences. No matter what anybody says, it's definitely possible, and in my opinion it's actually easier to build grand exhibits in Franchise Mode. In Franchise Mode, things can actually go wrong for you. There can be bad things that happen to your zoo, unpredictable circumstances, and when you mix this with the legitimate business decisions that you have to make, I find it more fun and engaging. For these reasons, Franchise Mode can be a bit challenging and almost intimidating for a new player to Planet Zoo. This is perfectly understandable. To be completely honest, I was a little bit nervous when I first started. The main goal of this series is going to be to help you guys be able to start your own franchises. What animal should I pick first? When should I start expanding into new territory? Is now the right time for the African elephant to enter the zoo? So many questions, so many possible mistakes to make, and eventually somebody's going to mess up. Today we're going to learn how to make a more successful franchise together. Every single zoo in the game, whether it's sandbox or franchise, starts with these simple guest spawning panels, and today, this is the exact same spot that we're going to start in. Since this series is heavily aimed at helping you, the viewers, make your own franchises more successful, if at any point you have any questions, whether it's about what we're talking about in the video, or just something you happen to think of in the moment, feel free to leave a comment, and I'll feature it in the next video the best I can. If you guys enjoy this series and want to be a part of the channel, feel free to like and subscribe. You're more than welcome. There's plenty of content along the way. We're growing such a wonderful community here together, and I'd be happy to have you along for the ride. The number one thing you're going to have to realize when starting a franchise zoo is that money is limited. You're going to come in with $40,000 and 300 conservation credits. This isn't necessarily a lot of money, so we're going to have to make it last. Let's get into the franchise and figure out how. The first thing that's going to happen when you enter a franchise zoo is you're going to be bombarded with messages to buy various buildings. You don't need to get them all right away. One of the easiest ways to make money, and matter of fact the only way to get guests into your zoo, is with animals. Therefore, you're going to need to buy an animal trade center first. This allows you to buy any animal in the game. Technically speaking, if you find a good deal, I would jump on it now. However, we're going to discuss starter animals much later in the video. Never forget that as of right now in your franchise, you still have around $40,000. This is not a lot of money when you remember you have to pay your staff wages, pay for various buildings, and a lot of other fixed costs. For now, just do a lot of planning ahead. Think about what you want your zoo to be like in your head. The very first addition to the zoo that we're going to add is a simple path that helps the guest get from the guest spawners out to where the eventual entrance is going to be. In order to do this, we're simply going to link the two together with a path, and then create a little pavilion that's just a simple square. For now, this is going to serve our purposes perfectly. This is exactly what we need, nothing more and nothing less. I then grabbed these things from the Facilities menu. This is actually what's going to allow the guests to get in and out of the zoo. However, sometimes if you place them, you can get these ugly little grass strips in between your path. If this happens, don't worry, we'll find a remedy for that later in the video. Now is the part that I actually like to hire my staff. A lot of people will say to do this a little bit later on, but I like to get research started right now so we can start building with other parts that we don't necessarily have quite yet. Well, that's a problem. In order to research, we're going to need a workshop. A workshop allows you to get research done, and what research specifically unlocks at this stage in the game is different components to building. I, for one, require to have the New World theme, since it has a lot of my favorite parts. And just like that, after about 5 minutes of waiting in real time, the New World theme is unlocked. Look at all these beautiful items we just unlocked to build with. A lot of glass, that's going to come in handy for our information center. We have a lot of fancy and modern appliances. I think we chose a perfect pack. Just a heads up, we're going to get into the building portion of this video now. We're going to work on our information and guest center. So if you don't know the basic controls or are completely brand new to the game, this next part of the video might be a little complicated. Unfortunately, I myself don't have a tutorial for this specifically. Alright, now we're going to begin construction on our very first building, which is going to be the Guest Center and Information Booth, which is actually where you're going to buy your tickets in person. To do that, we're going to knock out a little bit of the path and then come over to the Facilities menu. We're then going to buy these little information kiosks, and these are going to be where the guests actually make their transactions. Like I said before, this isn't necessarily a building tutorial, but I can provide some tips. The number one tip I provide to most new players, and returning players to make an easy franchise, is to actually build on the grid when you're making your very first buildings. And what this means is that use these items and blocks that are going to appear on the grid. They have a symbol next to them, and what this does is effectively makes it really easy to place things right next to each other, really tight. It also allows you to easily place blocks over each other, and when you're using glass, this is actually a very important and crucial strategy in order to make builds look good. One of the most important things you can do in Planet Zoo is to keep things realistic, but also have them make sense. Guests in Planet Zoo need to use the restroom, and where would you find a restroom in a zoo typically? Right at the start, maybe even in the guest center. Remember, all of this costs money, so if you're trying to build an extravagant entrance, try to keep it relatively simple. Basic shapes, easy angles, and not everything has to cost a ton of money. Building on the grid is very cheap. Eventually your build is going to start to take shape. As soon as you like where it's going, throw a roof on it. We'll come back and detail it later. Remember, money is relatively tight right now. Matter of fact, we're down to 16k. It may just look like a rectangle to you guys, but I actually really like where this build is going. I have a plan in my head, and usually I'd share it on screen, but I'm going to keep it a surprise for this video. Remember earlier when I said we can get rid of those ugly green patches that sometimes mess with the path? In order to do that, what you can do is actually use roof tile pieces and place them just slightly above the ground. This gives the illusion of a floor, and if there's path under it, the guests can still walk here. Now we're actually going to need an area for guests to get into our building, so it's not just a rectangle. In order to do this, we're just going to take this door we got with our research, align it to surface, and simply use the advanced movement tools in order to place it perfectly against a wall for all of the guests to use. I don't necessarily recommend over-detailing builds at this point in the game, since money is so tight. However, if you find a detail that you actually really like and don't necessarily want to forget about it, feel free to add it now. The one area I would highly recommend detailing up now, just so you know the rest of the layout and color palette that the zoo is going to use, is the interior of your entrance. I think this is really important. Don't forget, detailing doesn't have to be expensive, just don't use crazy items and use an abundance of them. Despite this being a semi-tutorial video and semi-start to a new series, you might be thinking, why would I have to do any of this in the first place? And the excellent part is, you don't necessarily have to do it, but I find that this is the easiest way to get attached to a zoo and keep it going for a long time. Detailing your builds inherently makes you like them better, it's just a fact. This is going to be an extremely important detail to the build, and probably the most important detail we make in the entire video. It's going to be adding depth to the outside. Adding trims and depth may not look too important, but I can't stress enough how important this is. If there's ever a build you see online or on Reddit or anywhere, odds are it has a really nice trim to it, which makes the build look a lot more formidable and imposing. This is a really good tactic, and you're going to have to get used to using the advanced movement menu in order to pull it off successfully. Once your entrance is nearing completion, your trim is done, and you have a roof on the place, and it's good to your liking, start adding the finer details. Label your building so guests know exactly what they're walking into. Add finer details. Try to tell a story with the build. How do you want your zoo to be? Do you want your zoo to be the life of the party, or do you want it to be a small little attraction? It's up to you completely. There's no right or wrong answer. The more details you add to a build, the more it's going to be set apart in the eyes of the viewers and yourself. For example, try to add gutters. Every building in real life has gutters to help with rainfall. This can actually avoid damages and other charges. This doesn't necessarily happen in Planet Zoo, but imagine if it did. Add some gutters to your build. I am quite happy with this entrance. It's incredibly simple and we still have a long way to go, but what a first impression for our zoo. I think the guests are going to really like it, both leaving and entering. We're going to use the exact same tactic we used to get that floor for our Zoo Information Center in order to cover up the ugly grass pieces that are still sticking out in the path. In order to do this, we're simply going to take some plaster, recolor it to a color that looks very similar to the path, but isn't exactly correct, so we have a little color variation, and we're simply going to build on the grid and get rid of all of the grass pieces we can possibly find. I think that looks a lot better than it did before. There's no more grass jutting through the path. We're actually getting dangerously low on money. Matter of fact, we only have about 25% of the capital that we started with. So what we're going to do now is actually burst down one of these walls and put our first animal in the zoo. In order to do that, we're actually going to come into our information center and place an exhibit down. An exhibit is a little bit different than an actual habitat, and they can be kind of complicated. However, they're imperative to the success of an early franchise zoo. Exhibit animals are really important to have for a variety of reasons. Number one, they're incredibly easy to take care of and relatively cheap to upkeep. But for two, they actually breed a lot, and you can sell the offspring for either money or conservation credits, which you can use to get other animals. Once your exhibit is placed, first make sure you have a path connecting to your animal trade center, but then access your animal trade center. Go to the exhibit animal storage and actually find an animal that you want. In order to do that, just open the exhibit animal storage and just look around. Remember, we don't have a whole lot of money at this point in the game, so we're going to want something good. And it actually looks like this Danube-crested newt has a gold star. We'll get a male and a female, as only male and females can breed together in this game, and then put them both into the exhibit. In order to put them both in the exhibit, simply adopt both of them, go to your storage, select both, and then click the exhibit you want them to go to, and they're instantly put there. Now that we actually have guests in the zoo, since we have animals in the zoo, we don't want them just bursting through the walls. You don't necessarily have to do this, but I do because it personally drives me insane. Take your guest barrier curbs, and then you can recolor them to however you want. I like to make them look like actual curbs of the path, so I simply do it relatively close to the path color. Where these curbs are placed, guests will not walk through. Place them over solid walls, windows, or pretty much anywhere where there's not a door and you don't want the guest to be. And check it out! Just like that, we have a successful entrance and the start of a functioning zoo. We even have our first animal, so this is officially a zoo. It's no longer just a building in the middle of a field. Welcome to franchise mode. Now we need to worry about what animal exactly we want to put inside of this zoo. I figured out this area is going to be a perfect area for a starter animal. Choosing a starter animal is never an easy decision, because it impacts the rest of your entire zoo, but there is some criteria that you should probably pay attention to when making your decision. A starter animal needs to be cheap, easy to take care of, and appealing to guests. In my opinion, by far the easiest starter animal is the flamingo. Flamingos are incredible as a starter animal because they're very adept at grabbing a guest's attention with their brightly colored plumage. It's also incredibly rare to see just one flamingo off on their own. Flamingos are social birds, meaning you're going to have to grow a flock, which is very profitable for a brand new franchise zoo. Flamingos are nowhere near endangered, with an estimated almost 800,000 of them currently alive in the wild. Their build requirements are also incredibly easy, only needing extra water as opposed to a normal animal which typically only needs a lot of land space. You will, however, need at least 10 of these guys in order to have an acceptable social group. They are social birds. Let's get started on our first habitat. The very first thing I like to do, regardless if the animal wants it or not, is I like to use the heavy soil feature on the terrain menu and just kind of dig out where I want the exhibit to be. I'm a visual guy, so this really helps me when planning my habitats. I think this is going to work out perfectly. There's going to be a lot of water in here, and we're even going to have a backstage area. Nothing too crazy, this is just our first habitat. The water is going to be the main feature of this exhibit. I'm even considering adding a waterfall, so in order to do that, we need to push the terrain down a little bit, and then flatten it to the foundation. Flamingos don't necessarily swim, they just like to wade around. With the water in and the exhibit looking good so far, I think it's finally time we add the fence to this exhibit. The fence is obviously going to stop the flamingos from escaping, but we also want guests to be able to see into the exhibit. If you remember looking back at the Zoopedia, it said the flamingos need a minimum of 1 meter tall fence. This is so they don't jump over it. They're surprisingly tall when you see them in the game. So, we're going to put glass where we want the guest to view the flamingo from, which is mainly going to be around this little bend. We're going to decorate this all with foliage later on, but just know for now that where there's glass, the guests are going to be expected to see. There's no path over at this section, so we don't necessarily want the guest to be even able to see over here. We might change this later, we might not. I'm not quite sure how this zoo is going to turn out. But for now, we're just going to use these wood barriers, since they're really cheap, and we are still on a budget since this is franchise. Now that we successfully got our exhibit done, at least the fence portion, the flamingos won't be able to escape, let's actually get them into the exhibit. Welcome to the zoo! This is our first habitat animal, and it looks like it can still escape a little bit. However, that's perfectly planned for. We're gonna get to that now. This is a blueprint that everybody who has the game has access to, and we're gonna be using it for this exhibit. For building on a budget, and building for beginners in general, there's no easier way to make a backstage look good than to simply just use the pieces from the blueprints that you already have access to. We already researched a little bit of items, therefore we could do this with a new world texture, however we're simply going to keep it very basic and use the blueprints that everyone has access to. If you have the game, you have these frontier blueprints. Therefore, we're simply going to copy and paste pieces off of it and build them together to make an even larger building that keeps the exact same color palette and scheme of the original. Quite a simple technique, but I actually think it looks quite nice. However, the only problem now is we have less than $1,000 in our bank account, so we're gonna have to fix that. Our zoo technically is making money right now, however we're spending more money than we're actually making, so we're not making a profit despite having an income. In order to fix this, we're gonna have to go into the menu and take out a loan. Now there's 3 loans you can take, $20,000, $5,000, and $50,000. For now we're just gonna take out $20,000. The bigger the loan, the more money you're gonna have to pay back, so you don't always wanna go with the $50,000. But now we do have $20,000 in our bank account. We're gonna have to get a profit going so we can repay this pretty soon. We're gonna use our $20,000 and actually get a research center. As of right now, we can't actually research the animals, which we're gonna have to do in order to make a good profit. We're simply gonna put this building over by the other ones that we have so far. We're not gonna worry about decorating them quite yet, that'll be in a later episode. And then we're gonna buy a vet. I guess hire is a better word. We're not actually buying the person. Then, we're going to assign the vet, and actually have him work on the research that we want. This is going to unlock various enrichment items and bonuses for the flamingos. Now that our vet is hard at work researching for the flamingos, let's make their habitat a little better with what we have already. In terms of making a successful franchise, there's probably nothing more helpful than the donation bin. Donation bins are so clutch when it comes to making extra profits, it's almost impossible to succeed without them in the early game. In order to make donation bins successful, you also need education around them. These education boards are going to do fine right away. The more our vet researches the flamingo, the more education bonus that the guests are going to receive. The more education bonuses, the more they donate, and the more we make. It's really simple. I don't necessarily think we made this water big enough, so we can simply just get rid of it, go back to the flatten the foundation feature, and make it a little bigger in some areas. Never be afraid to destroy what you've already made. It's not going to be perfect on the first try every single time. Sometimes you might get lucky, sometimes you won't. Just simply get rid of it and try again. There's no rush. As long as you pause the time, there's absolutely nothing that's going to come and destroy all of your profits in the short term. If you're extremely new to the game, this might not be the best idea. However, I'm not, and I think I can afford to detail this backstage up a fair amount. We're simply going to take this mesh fence that I found in the construction menu and place it all over the backstage. This is going to allow the zookeepers to actually see where the flamingos are before they enter the backstage. This is going to help them with safety, research, viewing, feeding, pretty much everything, because the keepers are going to be back here a lot. Since the keepers are going to be back in this backstage so often, I want to make it really nice for them. To do this, we're simply just going to kick out this fence, and then add a few more little clutch details back here. We're going to add some doors, maybe some desks where they can prepare the meals for the flamingos, just anything you think a zookeeper could possibly need. You don't necessarily have to do this, like I said. It is a franchise mode, and if you're newer to the game, it might not be the smartest thing to waste money like this on something that's purely aesthetic. However, I like to. You can definitely get away with it, even with taking out the loans. Just watch and see. The flock is thriving in their new habitat. However, it's actually starting to rain, and it's getting dark, so they're going to need a place to rest. Let's work on their hard shelter. All animals need a place to escape the rain. This is called hard shelter. All hard shelter has to be is a roof over their head. It can even be natural. They like beds put down too. Well, recording a time-lapse of the sunrise has its merits. Our first step of our greater flamingo research is actually complete. Now we can keep researching and unlocking more and more enrichment items. Looks like next we'll get an education bonus. The flamingo don't have any enrichment in their exhibit currently, which that's fine, we haven't had it researched yet, at least the ones we want, but the one thing that we can currently fix is their terrain requirements. It looks like they need a lot more rock and slightly less of everything else. But we don't necessarily want this exhibit to be just a rocky coast, that's not what I had in mind at all. In order to fix this, we can simply put the rock in the pool, which we're going to have a remedy for that later so it doesn't specifically be shown. However, we also want a lot of sand in this exhibit. You can actually merge terrains, add coarse sand, add fine sand, just try to mix and match. We also want the flamingo's pond to look a lot more man-made than it currently does. Also, to hide the rock, we can come through with some concrete and place it along the bottom to make it look more like an actual pool. Our flamingos are also getting quite hungry, so we can put a few food bowls down. We have some enrichment items for them. This doesn't necessarily count as enrichment, even though it's in the menu. They actually use this, and it's not really fun for them. Food enrichment counts as slow feeders, foraging pools, or anything they can use their brains to interact with. This is a simple feeder, so it doesn't necessarily count. Our flamingos still need to eat though, so just because this doesn't actually increase their enrichment bonus, we still need to add them, at least until we can get our foraging pools in, although we might as well just keep these. It looks like our keepers and our flamingos alike are working really hard to make this zoo popular. We already have our first flood of guests coming through. This is really good news. Now I think it's time to pretty up this exhibit. Let's add the waterfall. When adding rocks in such a manner, you have to be really mindful of your animal's traversable area. And what I mean by this is if a tiger was in this exhibit, for example, it could easily jump on this rock. However, a flamingo is not necessarily athletic. They're actually quite clumsy birds, and don't necessarily deal with elevation too well. So we're going to have to keep these rocks relatively close to each other and low to the ground, so the flamingos have absolutely no problem stepping up on them. Also, these are faux rocks. I really like them because you can change them however color you want. You have to have the aquatic pack to use them. However, you can do this technique with any rock in the base game as well. It's just a lot easier with these ones in my opinion. We're gonna simply put the bigger rocks close to the bottom and layer them up, almost like shingles on the roof of a house. We're doing this so the flamingos, again, can actually climb up here. We don't necessarily want them to climb too high, otherwise they're going to be able to jump over the fence. So we're going to have to keep this low to the ground so the flamingos can actually use it, but not high enough to where they can escape the exhibit. There's a fine line to cross when working with rocks, and it isn't necessarily the easiest thing in the game. Now actually focusing on the waterfall portion, now that we have the foundation done, the one thing that you have to remember when making a waterfall is that the details matter, and it has to be fairly realistic. And when I say realistic, I mean a waterfall has to do one thing, and that's fall. Therefore, the water has to be coming from high up. We're simply going to be taking and copy and pasting areas that we've already made and making a little bit of a hill with it. The water is going to come from the top of the hill and spill to the bottom of the pool. Remember, we have to be very careful that the flamingos can actually traverse back here so it doesn't impede on their space, but we can't have them actually jumping out the back of it. This is really easy, and I think we did a good job. You can then take your special effect blocks. These are in the construction menu under simply special effects. A lot of them do a variety of different things. There's no one right answer when making water effects, but for this one, the waterfall bottom is actually going to do just fine. We're going to have 3 of them and just layer it up to the top. We don't want this to look too rough, since flamingos don't live in the rapids of the Congo, they live on the coast. Waterfalls aren't necessarily a part of their natural environment, but this is the first exhibit in the zoo, so we really want it to be eye-catching to the guest. We're also going to merge these rocks over top of the special effects to make it look more like a coast that the flamingos would call home. Spoiler alert, I eventually scrapped this next part, because I didn't really like how it looked. It was a little bit too flashy for me. But I actually, kind of looking back on the recording, do like how this fountain effect looks. If you guys like it, let me know in the comments below. This exhibit looks incredible already. I really like the water effects, and the rocks look really nice in the background. It's only going to get better from here, and we're already making a profit. So just to recap, when choosing a starter animal, you want one that doesn't necessarily mind details, but it also doesn't necessarily need a lot of them. The flamingos are incredibly good for this, since we've already made their exhibit nearly 100% profitable. However, now we can actually go back and do detailing, now that we have extra money. We actually only spent $4,000 out of our $20,000 loan to make this exhibit. Luckily, the only thing we have to detail left now are plants and small little rocks. And luckily for us, flamingos actually don't necessarily want a lot of plants. Look in the top right. their coverage meter is incredibly low. This is actually a little bit difficult in order to make a really highly detailed exhibit, because it means the flamingos don't appreciate a lot of plants, and plants are by far the easiest way to detail an exhibit in Planet Zoo. So we're going to have to get a little bit creative in how we detail this exhibit, since they don't necessarily want a lot of plants, which is typically the answer. In order to do this, we're going to have to use a lot of grasses, a lot of bushes, and less trees. One single baobab tree would probably fill their entire plant meter to the top, so we don't really want to do that. We don't want plants to be the majority and focus of this exhibit, so we're going to have to detail with these little ones. We're going to add things like leaves at the bottom of their pool, since it's not going to be clean 100% of the time. We want to add little grasses for them to graze on, cattails on the side, plants that when viewed individually don't look very special, but when you place a bunch of them all detailed up, they look really nice and make the exhibit truly come together as a whole. Remember, with flamingos, no trees, more bushes, more grasses, more cattails and reeds. Absolutely no trees, because their exhibit will not be able to be detailed. Since flamingos don't necessarily like plants all too much, it actually makes them a lot better starter animal, as opposed to something like a lemur. Lemurs are also typically very good choices for starter animals, however they like so many plants and so much climbing equipment, this can actually make them a lot more expensive than flamingos. We technically didn't have to do any of this of the plants to make the flamingos more profitable, however we want this exhibit to be as realistic and nice looking as possible. So, we have to get the flamingos to the max of their plant meter without actually being over it. Lemurs have 100% plant coverage, which means you can put as many plants as possible in their exhibit and they'll never be tired of them. This makes it a lot more expensive to build for them, although you can detail it probably a fair bit more. Check it out! The exhibit's really coming together. The backstage, the normal part of the exhibit, it all flows together really nicely. We have a few more details to add, and we'll get working on that right now. Just because the flamingos don't necessarily like an abundance of plants in their exhibit doesn't mean we have to stop detailing it here. Matter of fact, this is where the true detailing can begin, because we can use rocks. There's no animal in the game that gets tired of rocks, especially the faux rocks, which are the best block in the game to build with. The reason these faux rocks are so effective is because most animals in the game can walk right over them, and they just provide that little bit of texture. You can change the color with these, sink them into the ground, and they look like little pebbles. You can make big rocks, you can make little ones. With these faux rocks sinking them into the ground in such a manner, you can even make them climb up the wall. You can make exhibits look entirely more realistic just by using this one simple item, and to be totally honest, I think this makes the aquatic pack the best DLC pack in the game, simply for just having these. You could take all of the animals out of the aquatic pack, and I would have still bought this, just for the faux rocks. So if you're watching this and don't have the aquatic pack, or the season pass in general, I would highly recommend it. Not only do you get great and incredible animals, highly detailed by Frontier, but you also get the faux rocks, which, like I said, are by far the best block in the game to detail with. Simply keep just sinking them into the ground, raising them up a little bit, and doing this all over the exhibit. It truly does make all of the difference, and it makes a regular exhibit so much better. It looks like our vet's hard work finally paid off. Now we just have to actually click the flamingo to get to the enrichment menu, and let's see what we unlocked. Sprinklers and a foraging pool. Perfect! Foraging pools are the first food enrichment item we actually have access to for the flamingo, and in order to place these, we're actually going to put them at the bottom of the pool. This is actually going to allow the flamingos to fairly realistically mimic their prey in the real life. They eat shrimp at the bottom of lake beds by digging around with their beaks. This is exactly what the foraging pool is intended to do. As for the sprinklers, it's simply a sprinkler. We're just going to put it here temporarily so they enjoy it. And I think that's going to do it for all of the building in this episode. We officially have a flamingo flock, we have a zoo that can make a profit, and we have a lot of happy guests already. This is a very successful episode 1, and if you guys enjoyed, don't forget to like and subscribe. This is going to be such an awesome series, and I forgot to say at the beginning of the video, this does not mean our Sandbox series zoo is going anywhere. The Orchid City Zoo still has full plans on continuing and finishing eventually. However, right now, I'm waiting for the Arid Pack to come out, because we actually need animals from the Arid Pack to continue. We're going to be alternating content. It's going to go franchise mode and then a Sandbox Mode episode for this foreseeable future. Unless you guys really like one series over the other. You have to let me know in the comments below. What a start to a series, though. I'm so happy with how both our entrance and first exhibit turned out. You really can't beat this. The next episode we're going to be detailing everything up. A lot of foliage, a lot of tutorial in terms of how to place plants really well. It's going to be a fun episode. Obviously the stars of this zoo so far are our beautiful flamingo flock. They're actually going to start nesting fairly soon. Matter of fact, it might have actually happened yet, who knows. Our zoo is actually so successful, we can already pay off our loan and have $6,000 left over. I really hope this more tutorial-focused first episode can help you guys make your own franchise, and if you do, let me know about it in the comments below, or feel free to join our Discord. That's going to be it for today's episode. See you again at the next one, coming real soon. Kingpin out. Don't forget to like and subscribe.